Story 1. The station beyond the end of the line. I've been riding the same commuter train for nearly 5 years. The 2:03 a.m. departure is the final one of the night, winding its way out of the city through the suburbs, ending in a small industrial depot where my apartment sits tucked behind a convenience store and a parking lot full of forgotten cars. I work late shifts, and I've always preferred the solitude of the last train. No chatter, no eye contact, just the low rattle of the wheels and the heavy drone of tired machinery. The routine, oddly enough, became a comfort, something I could trust, until the night I didn't wake up at the end of the line. It started like any other ride. I boarded half asleep, collapsed into my usual seat, third car from the front, right side by the window, and barely noticed as the stations slipped by. The car was nearly empty, just a slumped figure at the far end and the usual stale smell of metal and detergent. I don't even remember falling asleep. One second I was scrolling on my phone, the next my screen had gone black. Dead battery. That's when I noticed the silence. No conductor's announcement, no engine hum, just dead quiet. I blinked. The train wasn't moving. The lights were still on, but dimmer than usual, flickering slightly like a candle in a draft. I reached for my bag, ready to step out. That's when I saw him. A man I'd never seen before was standing over me, too close, bent forward at the neck, like his spine hadn't learned how to be human. His skin was so pale it seemed backlit, almost translucent, and his eyes were small and round like marbles soaked in milk. But it was the hole in his throat that froze me. Right there, where his Adam's apple should have been, was a clean, circular wound about the size of a golf ball. Not bloody, not messy, just empty. I could see right through it. The seat behind him blurred faintly in its frame. In a voice that didn't sound like a voice at all, he said, "You've reached the end of the line." Then he turned and walked away, moving in that same broken, twitchy fashion. I stood quickly, heart pounding, and pressed the button beside the door. Nothing. I tried again. No click, no response. The doors didn't budge. "Hey!" I shouted. "Open the door!" He didn't turn around, and before I could shout again, the train lurched forward, hard enough to throw me back into the seat. But we were past the final station. I watched in disbelief as the familiar terminal slid by, untouched. No staff, no janitors. The lights there didn't even seem on. The train kept going, past the switch tracks, past the final signal, into a tunnel I'd never seen on any map. There were no signs, no lights, just thick, oppressive dark swallowing the windows, and for the first time in 5 years of late-night rides, I felt it. This train was no longer part of my world. The train had no business still moving. After the final stop, the tracks should have ended, but we were still plunging forward into that unlit corridor, deeper and deeper. I stumbled through the aisle, steadying myself as the train tilted slightly to one side. The lights overhead were dim now, washed in a reddish hue that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. They buzzed softly as if straining against something invisible pressing in. I called out. No answer. "Hello? Anyone?" I moved through the next car, then the next. Empty. Each compartment looked the same. Seats lined in dull blue vinyl, small trash bins swinging on hinges, windows that showed nothing but darkness beyond. The driver's cab, when I reached it, was gone. I don't mean locked, I mean gone. There was no door, just a blank steel wall where the front of the train should have been. I stared at it for a full minute, confused, hoping some part of this was just a dream delayed by fatigue. I pulled out my phone. No bars, not even the emergency SOS signal. Just a gray void in the corner of the screen where the signal should be. Still, I tried dialing 911. The second I hit call, I heard it. A whisper, low, fluid, curling around itself like a snake, slithering through water. Not static, not noise. A voice. It spoke in a language I couldn't understand, like liquid syllables rolling off a tongue that didn't belong in a human mouth. I yanked the phone from my ear and stared at the screen. Still dialing. I hung up. The whispering stopped instantly. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it echoing down the empty car. I backed away from the front, moving slowly now. Every instinct in me wanted to run, but I was boxed in. The floor beneath me vibrated, not the gentle rumble of an engine, but something deeper, more primal, like the train was falling or being dragged. The walls of the car creaked softly. I turned and tried one of the emergency door release handles just in case. It was jammed. Every one I tried after that was the same. Then, without a sound of brakes or warning, the train began to slow. I nearly fell as the motion changed, momentum fighting back, gravity rolling oddly like the laws of motion were failing just slightly. My knees buckled and I caught the back of a seat for balance. A moment later, the train stopped. The doors opened. They didn't slide with a cheerful chime or mechanical whoosh. They groaned, long, drawn out, like old wet wood separating from its frame. I looked out. Beyond the threshold was no platform I recognized, no city, no suburb, not even ruins. What lay ahead was something outside of understanding, a gray, cratered landscape with pale, towering trees in the distance and strange, circular pits scattered across the cracked stone ground. The sky was wrong, not night, not day, just a swirling, roiling black dome above, pulsing with silent flashes of lightning trapped inside its clouds. I should have stayed inside, but something worse told me I couldn't, that whatever this train was now connected to, it wasn't finished with me yet. So I stepped out, and the doors closed behind me. I didn't know what I expected to find outside the train, but it sure as hell wasn't this. The sky wasn't a sky. It was a ceiling of black clouds twisted into a spiral, silent lightning flickering inside them like flashes of something waking up. Beneath my feet, the stone platform stretched into nothingness, cracked and pale like old bone. Just off the edge, sand, or something like sand, coarse, grainy, the color of ash, and they were there. Figures sat motionless along the benches, 8, maybe 10 of them. I didn't count. Couldn't. Each was tall, unnaturally so, with chalk-white skin stretched tight over lean, muscular frames. They looked human, almost, except for the gaping, clean hole that pierced through each of their throats, empty and dark, as if something had punched through and left it open forever. I should have run, but I just stood there as if gravity had increased only under my skin. Then he returned, the same conductor, ghost pale, eyes like polished stone, lips too dry to be human. He stepped off the train with that same eerie glide and looked straight at me, lips curling too far back in a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "We've arrived," he said, voice flat. "The next station is not for you." He tilted his head slightly. I noticed then that the hole in his throat made no sound when he spoke, just a strange stillness where there should have been vibration. "You have 1 hour before your return train arrives," he added. "Also, don't go out into the desert." And just like that, he stepped back into the train. The doors creaked shut behind him. The train began moving, slowly at first, then faster, disappearing into the black tunnel at the far end of the platform. I was alone. I sat on the edge of a low step and watched the seated figures. They didn't blink, not even once. 10 minutes passed, maybe 20. I had no watch, and my phone was still dead, a black mirror offering nothing back. The wind picked up, or maybe that's just what it wanted to feel like. The air grew colder, but not from temperature. It was more like pressure. That's when I heard it. A distant, wet clicking, like claws tapping across stone, coming from far out in the ash dunes. The figures stirred, not much, just slight tilts of the head, joints twitching unnaturally, as if shaking off sleep they weren't supposed to have. They all turned to face the dunes. And then it came, a shape, first hunched, then rising as it neared. Taller than a man, its back curved like a question mark, cloaked in cracked leathery folds. Its face, or where a face should be, was a sharp, hooked beak that clicked with every movement. From beneath its robes, multiple legs fanned out like an insect's, but longer, more fluid. I stood. I don't remember choosing to. My legs just moved. The figures opened their mouths. No words came out, only a sound, inhuman, high-pitched, like glass being dragged across steel, a scream not meant for ears. It cut straight through my chest like wire through clay. My hand shot to my ears, but it didn't help. It was inside me. It was everywhere. The beaked thing turned, and so did the rest. All of them, 10 white-skinned creatures, throats gaping, mouths screaming, turned toward me, and then they moved. Not fast at first, just a step, then another, then leaping. I didn't look back. I ran, down the steps, across the ash. The sound of them behind me, bones cracking, tongues lashing, sand splitting with every inhuman stride. I ran harder than I thought possible. And in the distance across the dunes, the pits opened, swirling voids, not natural, not wind-carved, not even physical, really. They pulled like they wanted thought and breath more than body. One lashed tongue grazed my arm, barbed and hot, like metal dragged from a fire. I screamed, but didn't slow. My shoes slipped on the loose terrain. Something brushed my back. And then, black, like the world blinked. The sound vanished. The heat drained, and I collapsed face first into the dust. I thought it was over, but just before my eyes shut, a figure appeared, not one of them. Someone I knew, someone I'd seen before, but couldn't place, not yet. They knelt beside me, and then the dark took everything. I awoke gasping, cheek pressed against cold stone, the station. I was back, but it was different now. Worse, the sky above wasn't swirling anymore. It was boiling. The clouds churned like smoke caught in a pressure chamber, pulsing in and out like a living lung. And the benches, empty. The pale figures were gone. No footprints, no sound. Just the distant, constant grinding of something massive beneath the surface. Something hungry. My legs wouldn't move at first, not from pain, but from some primal refusal to continue. Still, I forced myself upright. The air was heavier, dense. Breathing felt like inhaling water. Then I saw it. The train. It had returned, but it wasn't the same one. This one looked dead. The metal was rusted, slumped like a collapsed lung. The windows cracked and blackened. One of the cars buckled slightly with each breath the ground took. Still, it opened its doors. And the conductor was there again. He didn't say a word. He just stared, eyes hollow, arms folded in a stance that said, "This is your only chance." But even as I stepped closer, Something inside me clenched. Behind me in the dunes, the sound started again. The scream. It didn't build. It pounced. A layered, piercing, static scream that tore through air and bone. I didn't look back. I ran for the train. Inside, the lights buzzed faintly. Every seat but one was filled. Pale forms facing away, heads gently tilted, holes still gaping where their throats should have been. Not moving, not breathing, just waiting. I took the empty seat. The door slammed shut. The train moved, but it didn't lurch like before. It slid, soundless, like sinking through oil. Outside, the landscape didn't blur. It melted, features warping and folding into themselves like wet paper in fire. I saw stations flash by, but not like the one I left. Each one was wrong. One was built into the side of a giant rib cage, its platform covered in what looked like wet teeth. Another was vertical, its passengers floating, unblinking, twitching in bursts like broken puppets. Another one, just eyes. Hundreds of them pressed into the glass, following us as we passed. Then one final station. It looked just like mine. The same city station. Only every figure on the platform turned as the train approached. All of them had my face. I couldn't breathe. And then I blinked, and the train was still. Doors open. Daylight bleeding in. The same terminal I always arrived at. Same schedule board, same concrete, same silence. But it wasn't morning. It was too quiet. No announcements, no screeching brakes from other trains, no people, just air. I stepped out, legs weak. Everything looked right, but it fell off. Like a mirror image, copied and copied until the details began to smear. I climbed the stairs to street level and stopped. The city stood still. Cars sat in the streets, windows fogged. Traffic lights blinked for no one. A single piece of paper drifted by, scraped along the sidewalk by a breeze that didn't feel like wind at all. I was back, but something had come with me. I can feel it, still, in the pressure in my skull, in the rhythm of sounds behind walls, in the way shadows lean just slightly the wrong way. Every night, I hear it again. That scream, just under the hum of street lights, just beneath my breathing, behind my thoughts. It's waiting. Maybe the train took me somewhere I shouldn't have seen. Or maybe it didn't bring me all the way back. Either way, I never take the 2 a.m. train anymore, but sometimes I dream I already did, and I wake to find sand in my shoes. Story 2. The Legend of Kisaragi Station. It started like any other Thursday. I was exhausted. Another long day buried beneath paperwork and backlit screens. By the time I reached the platform, the station was nearly empty. Blanketed in that strange hush cities get just before midnight. The train arrived on time. I stepped in, found my usual corner seat, and slipped my bag onto my lap. The car was oddly quiet. No chatter, no announcements, just the low hum of the engine and the faint flicker of overhead lights. I must have nodded off. Not for long, maybe 10, 15 minutes. But when I opened my eyes, the scenery beyond the windows had changed drastically. We'd passed not only my stop, but several more, and the lights outside were gone, just endless trees and the pitch-black silhouette of hills rushing by. Confused, I checked the digital route map overhead. Blank. No names, no markers, just a static glow. I tried to stay calm, convincing myself it was a late-night detour or maybe an error in the system. But I was the only one in the car. I hadn't even noticed when the last passengers got off. I stood and moved toward the nearest door, peering into the next car. Empty. I walked through it. and the next one. Still no one, not even a conductor. Anxiety crawled up my spine. I sat back down and pulled out my phone. The signal was weak, but usable. I opened a local forum I frequented and posted. Does anyone know what's going on with the 1142 eastbound line? Passed my stop 20 minutes ago. No announcements, no one on board. Replies trickled in within minutes. You should find the conductor. Maybe a maintenance reroute? Are you sure you didn't miss your stop while asleep? I scrolled through suggestions and hesitated. I hadn't seen a conductor at all. Not even the usual announcement chime. Everything was off, like I'd stepped into a version of the world that looked the same, but wasn't. Just as I was about to reply, the train jerked to a halt. No chime, no voiceover, just silence. The door hissed open. I stepped out. The platform was completely dark, save for a cracked station sign flickering overhead. It read, Kisaragi Station. I stood there for a moment, chilled by the wind that seemed to come from nowhere, carrying with it no sound, no traffic, no insects, no city echo. Nothing. I turned to get back on the train. The doors had closed. It pulled away slowly, slipping back into the tunnel from which it came, its red taillights winking out one by one. And then I was alone. No people, no vending machines, no working lamps, just an old bench, a rusted sign, and an unsettling quiet pressing down from all sides. I checked my phone again. The forum was still open. I posted, "Train left me." I don't know where I am. It says Kisaragi Station. Has anyone heard of this stop? A few people responded almost instantly. There's no such station on that line. Are you joking? That place is just a story. Get out of there. I looked around, trying to find a map, a ticket booth, even a trash can. There was nothing. The station was skeletal, like it had been forgotten by time. And then it hit me. I wasn't supposed to be here, but the tracks behind me had gone quiet. No echo, no return. There was only forward, and the silence. I should have stayed on the train. That thought played over and over in my mind the second the doors closed behind me. The silence that followed was absolute, like sound had been swallowed by the night. No wind, no echoes, just me standing under a broken sign that read, Kisaragi Station. I tried to shake the rising dread, searching the platform for anything, an exit, a map, even a trash bin. There was nothing, not even the usual grime or clutter you'd expect at an old station. It was too clean, too still. My phone had one bar of signal left. I called my parents. "Where are you?" my mother asked, her voice sharp with confusion. "Kisaragi Station," I told her, pacing near the edge of the platform. Silence. Then, "That's not a real station. Are you reading that right?" "I am," I said, staring up at the flickering letters again. Still, Kisaragi. Her voice cracked. "There's nothing by that name on your line. Call the station master. Don't go anywhere, okay?" There was no station master. There weren't even doors leading out of the place. Just thick trees beyond the fence and a tunnel the train had disappeared into. When I tried to walk toward the edge of the platform, I stopped. Not because I was afraid of falling, but because I realized something. The trees weren't right. They stood like silhouettes, too tall, too still, like they were holding their breath. Then I heard it, a faint ding, 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 bells, ringing somewhere out there in the woods, slow and deliberate. Then came the drumming, distant, hollow, like it was coming from beneath the earth. A rhythm I couldn't place, but one that sent my heart racing. I posted another update to the forum. Still at Kisaragi, no exits, no one here. Hearing weird sounds. Bells? Drums? Anyone know what this is? Replies exploded almost immediately. Get out of there! That station is a myth, a ghost stop. You need to leave. Someone joked about it last year, said it's where people vanish. Another post just said, don't follow the sound. I didn't plan to, but there was nowhere else to go. I backed away from the platform edge, deciding to follow the tracks instead. Maybe I'd reach a maintenance shed or signal box, something. But as I moved toward the path, a voice sliced through the silence. Hey, don't walk on the track, it's dangerous. I jumped and turned. A man stood behind me, or half of one. His right leg was gone, cleanly severed below the hip. His body leaned awkwardly, but he didn't use a crutch or cane. He just stood there, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. Before I could speak, he vanished. I don't mean he ran or turned a corner. He was simply gone. I stumbled backward, hands trembling, heart thudding like the drums echoing through the trees. I opened my phone again. The signal blinked once, then dropped completely. My last message on the forum was short. There's someone here. I think I'm seeing things. The temperature had dropped. My breath was fogging, but the air felt dry. Like the cold wasn't real, just another layer of whatever this place was. I curled up on the bench, gripping my bag tightly, eyes scanning the platform again and again for any flicker of movement. I didn't want to walk the tracks. I didn't want to go near the trees, but I couldn't stay on this platform forever. Something was watching. I could feel it. Something that had been waiting long before I ever boarded that train. It was the cold that finally forced me off the platform. Not the bells, not the drums, not even the one-legged man who vanished right in front of me. The cold was wrong. It didn't bite like normal cold. It seeped into my thoughts, into my bones. I gripped my bag, checked my phone, still no signal, and took one last glance at the station. Still no lights, still no exit, still no signs of life. So I stepped off the edge and began walking the tracks into the tunnel. At first, it was silent. My footsteps echoed off the damp walls and the gravel shifted beneath my shoes. My flashlight, already dim from too much use, started flickering after the first 100 steps. The tunnel just kept going. I don't know how long I walked. My watch had frozen at 11:37 p.m., and the air never shifted. Just the same stale wind and the heavy pressure of the dark pressing down on me. I tried to count my steps. I lost count after 500. I should have turned back. But back to what? That was when I tripped. The ground beneath me suddenly shifted. An uneven chunk of broken concrete cut into my shin. My flashlight clattered away, spinning. I crawled after it in the pitch black, heart racing. My fingers brushed over something slick. Metal? Number A shoe. A man's shoe. And then a voice called out, "Need some help?" I jumped. My flashlight flared back to life. Barely. At the far end of the tunnel stood a man in a black suit. Clean. Unscuffed. A red scarf around his neck. He didn't belong here, but something about him made it hard to not trust him. He smiled gently and held out a hand. "You look lost." I hesitated, every nerve screaming at me to run, but I was bleeding, disoriented, and freezing, so I took it. His hand was warm, too warm. We walked side by side back toward the tunnel mouth. He talked about the weather, about the way trains used to be quieter in the old days. I answered with short replies. eyes locked on the growing light ahead. Kisaragi station hadn't changed. It was exactly as I left it, empty, dark, silent. Except now a train waited at the platform. It was an older model, paint faded, windows stained by years of grime. No destination listed on the front. He turned to me. "This one's going your way." I should have run, but something compelled me forward. I stepped on, barely noticing there were no other passengers. We sat down. That's when his voice began to change. He stopped using real words. The tone remained polite, but the syllables melted, like someone trying to mimic language without knowing how it works. Teso, Mahari, Vain, Fessin, I froze. "Sorry. What did you say?" His eyes met mine, but he didn't blink, just kept muttering. I pulled out my phone. 1 bar. Enough to post. Back on a train, not sure where it's going. Guy I'm with isn't making sense anymore. I hit send. The windows outside began to show trees, but not normal trees. Their trunks bent backward. The leaves looked brittle and black, like burnt paper. Some branches curled against the glass as if trying to reach in. And then mountains, snow-covered, jagged. But we hadn't been heading north. None of this made sense. My body swayed with the train's motion, but the rhythm was off. The hum under my seat didn't sound mechanical. It sounded alive. The man beside me had stopped speaking. Now he was smiling. His teeth were too even, too white. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. My hand trembled as I typed another update. "Something's wrong. I don't think this is a normal train. I don't think he's normal either." I glanced up. He was staring at me now, head tilted, like a dog hearing a strange sound. The train plunged into another tunnel, longer, darker. The lights flickered and stayed off. I could still feel him watching me in the dark. And somewhere in the distance I heard that sound again. Bells, and beneath it, the drums. "My name is Hasumi. If you're reading this, I hope you're not on a train. I don't know where I am anymore. I don't know how long I've been here." The man beside me has stopped pretending. It started just after we passed the forest, the one that didn't move right. The trees bent the wrong way, like they were being pulled by something underneath the soil. Some had no leaves, others had too many, covering up faces. I swear I saw a pair of eyes open and blink inside the bark. I tried not to look anymore, but it wasn't just the trees, it was the light. It dimmed without source, like someone was adjusting the brightness of the world. Colors began to bleed out. My reflection in the window, gone. His, still there, still smiling. "There are people here," I wrote on the forum, "but only when I'm not looking." Flashes, flickers. In the corner of my eye, I'd catch glimpses of passengers, frozen stiff, no eyes, no mouths. Gone the moment I turned my head. At one point, a girl sat across from me, staring straight ahead. She looked about 7, pale, no shoes. Her hands were flat on her lap, unmoving. I blinked. She was gone. The man hadn't spoken for minutes. Then, suddenly, he began to laugh, quietly, like something was funny, but only to him. It was rhythmic, mechanical. I asked where we were going. He turned his head, jerked slightly like a puppet, and said, "You shouldn't have come here. Now you won't leave." Stopped breathing. Every hair on my body stood on end. I grabbed my phone. 1 bar, just one. He's not real. It's not cold here anymore. Why can't I wake up? The windows had gone completely black now. Not dark. Black. Like we weren't moving through space anymore, just through something else. There was no vibration, no hum, no sound, not even the drums now. only silence, the kind that hurts, the kind that listens. I stood up. I didn't care where we were going. I needed off. The man watched me, eyes wide now, lips twitching in an almost smile. I stumbled past him toward the next car. The door wouldn't open. It didn't even exist. There was only wall. Behind me, I heard the soft scratch of fingernails on glass. I turned. Nothing. He was gone. So was my seat. There was only me and the dark. Battery low, I typed. Things are getting strange. I'm going to make a run for it. I hit send. That was the last thing I wrote. The next part is harder to explain. I ran, but I wasn't moving. The train twisted under me like I was running down the throat of something ancient. Every step pulled the world tighter around me. I tried doors, windows, even the emergency brake. Nothing existed where it should. I screamed, no echo. I cried. The tears didn't fall. They hung in the air like dust. Then, bells, faint, familiar, and the train. It slowed. I fell forward into a hallway I'd never seen before. Stone floors, flickering yellow light. There were no tracks here, just a corridor stretching into a deep red haze. Someone stood at the end of it. They looked like me, exactly like me. They smiled and said, "We've been waiting. If you find a station named Kisaragi, don't get off the train. If you miss your stop and no one else is aboard, don't stay seated. And if someone in a suit offers you help, don't take their hand." I think my name was Hasumi, but I can't remember how to say it anymore. Story 3. The Headless Lantern Ghost of Maco Station. I never planned to come back. The town of Maco had faded like a photograph left too long in the sun. The post office was shuttered, its paint blistered and peeling. Kudzu blanketed the old hardware store like a burial shroud. But the tracks, that rusting scar slicing through the pine woods, they were still there, and they pulled me back like iron to magnet. I rented a small cottage near where the station used to be, now just a weed-choked clearing and a collapsed bench. The silence out here isn't the peaceful kind. It hangs heavy, like it's holding its breath. Even the birds avoid the trees near the tracks. The locals still talk, always with lowered voices like the pines might overhear. "You here for the light?" the clerk at the gas station asked, squinting at me like she already knew the answer. "No," I lied. "Just visiting." Everyone here has a story, second-hand or otherwise. A cousin who saw a light dancing on the rails. A grandfather who worked the line and swore he saw it swing like a lantern back and forth before blinking out into nothing. But they all agree on one thing. It never strays far from the place where Joe Baldwin lost his head. At first, I laughed it off. Old ghost stories cling to small towns like ivy on brick. But that changed the night I found the photo. It was buried in a shoebox, deep in my grandmother's attic. Faded, almost sepia. 4 men in heavy coats and railway caps, standing by a steam engine. One of them bore my great-grandfather's name. He stood next to a man labeled J. Baldwin in scratchy ink. That gave me pause. But it was the background that froze my breath, the forest, the exact curve in the tracks near Maco. It looked nearly identical to how it is now. That night, something woke me, a scratching sound, not like animals or branches, too deliberate, slow, metallic, dragging. I sat up, heart pounding. At first, nothing. But then came the flicker, a faint, wavering glow outside the window, white, cold, moving. By the time I reached the door, it was gone. The air smelled faintly of smoke and something sharper, like ozone after a lightning strike. The next day, I went walking, followed the rails deep into the trees. No birds, no wind, just the creak of old ties under my boots. I stopped where the ground dips near the old junction. That's when I saw him, an old man, thin as a fence post, standing at the edge of the trees. He wore a long coat and stared at the tracks like they owed him something. "He's still looking," he said almost to himself. I asked who. The brakeman. Lost his head, lost his rest. Then he turned and walked into the woods without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that flicker again, felt that strange hush pressing in around me, like the forest, like the tracks, were waiting, not for me exactly, for something. And I was starting to think it had never really stopped waiting. They say curiosity can kill more than cats. I hadn't believed in ghosts, not really, but after the scratching sounds at night, after seeing that flicker at the window, the part of me that used to scoff had grown quiet. I wanted to know who Joe Baldwin really was. I started with the county library. Dust choked the shelves, and the archives room smelled like paper rot and mildew. But in a metal drawer of yellowed newspaper clippings, I found what I needed. August 1867, brakeman decapitated in rail collision outside Maco. Heroic attempt to avert disaster fails. It hit harder than I expected. He hadn't just died, he acted. He tried to stop a collision, lantern in hand, racing into the dark. They found his body near the wreckage. His head was never recovered. Later that day, I met a local historian who kept a private collection of railway records, handwritten logs, crude sketches, decades of reports, all echoing the same thing, the light. 1912, bright white orb seen swinging near mile marker 247, disappeared when approached. 1935, engineer reported lantern-like glow ahead on a foggy night. Slowed the train, no person found. 1976, Boy Scouts camping near Trestle saw a light appear and vanish 3 times. No electrical sources nearby. Each entry different, each the same. That night, it rained. Not the kind of drizzle you ignore, the kind that soaks into bone. I waited until after midnight, then left the cottage and walked toward the tracks. The flashlight in my hand felt pathetic, useless against the wet dark. At first, there was nothing, just the hissing of rain through leaves and the squelch of mud underfoot. I followed the rails east, where the trees thinned and the gravel curved in that old familiar bend, the one I'd seen in the photo. Then I saw it, far ahead, just a pinpoint at first, a white glow, software pulsing. It moved, closer now, and with it a sound, faint at first, then rising, the rhythmic clack, 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 clack of metal wheels on iron. But the line had been dead for decades. The light swayed side to side, just like they said, like it was gripped by an invisible hand. I stood rooted, heart hammering, rain dripping from my hood and chin. The light brightened, too fast. It was rushing toward me. I raised the flashlight. The beam passed right through the glow, and then nothing. The air snapped, sharp and electric. My skin prickled as if lightning had passed through me. The scent of ozone hit next, mingled with something else, charred wood. I blinked. The light was gone, but the rails beneath my feet were warm. I ran. Back at the cottage, I peeled off soaked clothes with shaking hands. I checked the clock. 2:12 a.m. Later, I opened the photograph again. My great-grandfather standing next to Baldwin, both smiling. I hadn't noticed it before, but in the background, way behind the group, a small shape hovered in the distance, a glow, white, blurred. It hadn't been a defect in the film. It was the same shape I saw on the tracks. And I think it had been there all along. I haven't slept right in days. It started the morning after I saw the light, after the smell of scorched wood clung to my clothes like a memory I couldn't wash out. That was when the dreams began. Each night they come. Steam howls through dark tunnels. Screeching metal splits the silence. I see a figure at the edge of vision, always just ahead. Shoulders hunched, lantern in hand, but no head atop his neck. The lantern swings wildly in the dark. It's never still. In one dream, I stood in the middle of the tracks, unable to move. The headless man approached. The lantern flared, then everything went white. I woke, gasping, ears ringing. What shook me most was this. The faint echo of a train whistle still lingered long after I was awake, but the nearest active line had been removed decades ago. I wasn't the only one feeling it. A young couple camping near the Maco woods left in the middle of the night, left everything behind. Tent, gear, phones. When I tracked them down later, they didn't want to talk, only muttered something about the glowing man and his screaming light. Then something happened I couldn't explain away. I stepped outside one morning to find a small object sitting neatly on the porch boards. It looked like a railroad spike, rusted, pitted, old. But when I picked it up, it burned my skin. It was warm, like it had just come out of a fire. I dropped it immediately. The next day, I visited a former railroad signalman who still lived nearby, name of Walter Riggins. His house was a hushed museum of switches, signs, and black and white photos. "I know why you came," he said before I even spoke. He took a breath, looked out the window. We used to see it regular back when the line still ran, always between 2:10 and 2:13 a.m. Never missed. Didn't matter the season. Didn't matter the weather. Light always came, always swung side to side like a warning. He looked down. Some men started calling it Baldwin's watch. That night, I stayed awake, eyes locked on the old clock above the fireplace. At exactly 2:11 a.m., the room went cold. I didn't hear anything at first, just silence. Then came the faint click of glass tapping against glass. I turned toward the window. Outside, half shrouded by fog, was a light. Not from any flashlight or house lamp. It hovered just above the old railway bed behind the trees, and it moved, swinging, slowly, deliberately. The motion wasn't random. It felt urgent, like it was trying to be seen, trying to say something before it was too late. Then it stopped, just for a second, and blinked out. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just sat there in the dark, the ticking of the clock suddenly loud in the silence. And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. The light wasn't haunting the tracks. It was watching me. They say once you've seen the Maco light, it never really lets you go. I didn't believe that. Not at first. I do now. I've tried to leave twice. Packed a bag, drove away, tried to outrun the feeling, but it followed. In hotel mirrors, in roadside fog, in the hum of power lines at night. I saw it, or thought I did. The white glow, that sickly swing. I turned back each time. Some places don't let you go once you touch them, or once they've touched you. I wanted to prove what I saw. I brought a camera, a good one, set it up on a tripod by the tracks, just past where the old mile marker leans into the undergrowth like a grave too tired to stand. I waited. The light came. I saw it through the viewfinder, glowing pale against the black of the forest. But when I hit record, the camera blinked once, and died. When I checked the footage later, it was corrupted. No image, just a sharp, deafening screech like metal grinding on metal over and over. People told me the light was just swamp gas, or headlights, or old tricks of the mind, but those people hadn't seen the trees, noticed it last week. Scorch marks high up, in narrow arcing patterns like something hot had passed through. Some leaves still curled black at the edges. The forest itself was scorched in mid-air. Last night, I went back to the site of the crash. The mile marker stood crooked in the dirt. I don't know why I reached for it, some impulse like gravity, but when my fingers touched the rusted metal, something opened. I wasn't standing there anymore. I was inside it. The scream of steam, the rattle of wheels, the dark tunnel of trees rushing past, it all came crashing in. I saw Baldwin, just for a moment. He was running, lantern in hand, headless, and I felt it the moment he knew that the train wouldn't stop, that he couldn't save anyone. The light flared so bright it burned, then impact, screams, silence. I collapsed backward, gasping, dirt in my throat. But the worst part wasn't the vision, it was the realization that followed. The light isn't haunting the tracks, it's replaying. A message caught in time, a warning that never finishes. Every night it swings, hoping someone will see it soon enough, hoping maybe that it will work this time, that he won't die again. But he does, over and over, every night. And now the light appears even when I'm not near the tracks. It flickers at the edge of my property. I hear dragging footsteps the gravel path, and sometimes, just before sleep takes me, I swear I see a dim white glow underneath the door, swaying, always swaying. They say the light doesn't hurt anyone, but they're wrong. It lingers, it latches, and once you see it, it never leaves. Story 4. The Ghost Train of Bostian's Bridge. I never meant to chase ghosts. I only wanted the truth. Old railway disasters are a strange obsession, I know that. Most people forget wrecks, bury them under years and weeds, but I collect them. Every twisted rail, every scorched timetable, every name on a casualty list, each one a fracture in time, sealed over too quickly. That's what drew me to Bostian's Bridge. The wreck happened in 1891, just after midnight. Southern Railway's train number 9 was running behind schedule as it curved through the Blue Ridge Mountains. It never made it out. The engine flew off the stone trestle and pulled the sleeper cars with it 60 feet down into the ravine. 22 people died. No one could explain why. Theories came and went. Sabotage, rotted ties, brake failure, but the truth stayed buried with the wreckage. What stuck with me was the aftermath. Townsfolk describing it as a charnel house. The way steel wrapped around limbs like ribbon. How the dawn rose over fire and silence. When I arrived in Statesville, I wasn't expecting much. The bridge was still in use, though mostly freight now. It looked ordinary. Low stone arches stretching over thick woods and a gully that had choked back decades of rain. But something about the air clung too tightly to the lungs. The breeze carried no bird song, just the hush of trees holding breath. I walked the length of the bridge, slow, eyes scanning the gravel like something might leap out from it. About halfway across, I stopped. A shimmer caught my eye, a glint, almost swallowed by dirt. I knelt, dug carefully with my fingers. It was a gold pocket watch, tarnished, the chain broken, its glass face smeared with rust. But the hands, they were perfectly intact, frozen at 3:14 a.m. I don't know why I took it home. I should have left it in the dirt. That night, I dreamed in metal, shrill screeches, tearing iron, screams threading through smoke. I saw flashes of movement, someone running down a burning corridor, the glint of a uniform soaked in blood. I woke, gasping, cold sweat clinging to my spine. But that wasn't the worst part. There was mud on my boots, red, sticky clay, the kind from the bridge ravine. I hadn't stepped off the gravel trail all day. I couldn't stop thinking about that watch. After the first night, after the dream and the mud, I told myself it was just the mind playing tricks, that I'd carried some of the earth back on my boots, that it was only a dream, vivid and sharp as it was. But even in the daylight, something felt skewed, like time had thinned around me. The watch wouldn't open again. The clasp clicked, but the case refused to budge. And always, always the hand stayed locked at 3:14 a.m. I started digging. Not at the bridge this time, but into the past. The local library had an archive room, mostly dust and brittle paper. I asked for any reports on the 1891 crash. The woman behind the desk hesitated before handing over the files, like she wanted to warn me. But she didn't, just slid the box across the counter. Inside were blurred photographs, articles clipped from century-old papers, and a few handwritten letters. Witnesses, I think, trying to process what they'd seen. What caught my eye wasn't the wreckage. It was a figure that showed up more than once in the margins of the photos. A man standing just beside the shattered engine. He wore a dark railway uniform. A chain glinted on his chest. A watch chain. In one photo, the light reflected off the glass of the watch face. Even in the grainy image, the time looked close to 3:14. I copied every document I could. At home, I pinned them up on the wall. Timelines, maps, names of the 22 who died that night. I whispered each one out loud, like somehow saying them would settle the air. Instead, the air changed. That week, I started hearing things. Low sounds, subtle. A distant whistle around 3 a.m., too far away to be real, too sharp to be imagined. Footsteps tapping on steel, like someone pacing the tracks outside my window. When I rushed out, nothing, just silence and dew. One morning, I found my journal open. I don't remember leaving it that way. A page I hadn't written on yet, blank the night before, now had a number scrawled in the middle, written in my own hand. 20 seconds circled, deep grooves in the page, like whoever wrote it pressed hard with purpose. The same number as the dead. I tried telling myself it was a coincidence, a mistake. Maybe I jotted it half asleep. But a part of me, the part that felt the cool weight of that watch in my pocket, knew better. I returned to the bridge 2 days later, just before dusk. The place was empty, still. At the edge of the trestle, I looked down into the ravine, and for a flicker, less than a second, I thought I saw movement in the trees below. Not animals, people, 22 shadows, watching me from the place where they fell. I told myself I wouldn't go. For weeks, I avoided the date. I blocked out August 27th in every calendar I owned, physical and digital. But no matter how hard I tried to forget, something wouldn't let me. The whispers began again. First faint, like wind moving through brittle trees, then clearer, closer. Every night, as the anniversary neared, I heard footsteps above me. And always at 3:14 a.m., the sound of a whistle so real, I felt the pressure shift in the room. I didn't sleep the night before. At midnight, I was already driving through narrow, winding roads, headlights cutting through thick Carolina dark. I didn't pack anything but a flashlight, a notebook, and the watch. It was still stopped, still cold. When I arrived, the bridge looked older than before. The stone had darkened as if soaked in something deeper than water. I wasn't alone. 5 others stood along the edge of the trestle. They didn't speak, just nodded at me like they'd been expecting one more. We weren't friends, not even acquaintances. We were watchers, drawn by something we couldn't name. We waited. The air grew still. Even the insects went quiet. Time slowed, bent inward. Then, 3 a.m., everything changed. A strange weight settled on the group. One woman fell to her knees, hands gripping her chest. Another clutched a rusted lantern, staring past us into the trees with wide, unblinking eyes. No one moved. We couldn't. The bridge began to hum. Not a sound, more like a vibration deep inside the bone. Then came the light. A faint glow in the distance, like a headlamp approaching through fog. But there was no train, just air bending, warping, parting. The whistle pierced the silence, high and shrill. No earthly machine should still produce that sound. And suddenly, it was there, a translucent locomotive, gliding through the night with impossible speed. Its wheels never touched the tracks. The entire engine shimmered, carved from light and smoke. The outline of human faces pressed against the windows in frozen panic. It raced across the bridge, then vanished mid-air. A blast followed, white, silent, searing. It didn't knock us back. It knocked something loose inside. My chest seized. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. And then I heard it, a voice right beside my ear. You were there. And I remembered. Not everything, just flashes. The smell of coal, screams. A child's rag doll tumbling past me in mid-air. Fire blooming out of shattered wood. Then I was back, kneeling on the bridge. The others were scattered, dazed. No one spoke. One man sobbed quietly. The watch in my pocket ticked once, just once, then fell silent again. We left without saying a word. But I know now, this isn't just a haunting, it's a reenactment, a loop. And somehow, I'm part of it. They say time only moves forward, but I know better. Since that night on the bridge, I haven't been the same. Days blend, nights stretch. I'll be walking through my apartment and suddenly smell scorched wood. Or I'll blink and the wallpaper flickers to old train siding. I hear voices, quiet, overlapping, like 2 centuries trying to share the same breath. I don't think I'm haunted. I think I'm entangled. I tried to ground myself, catalog the experience, draw timelines, interview locals again. But even the interviews were wrong. One old man I'd spoken with weeks ago, who'd told me plainly about the annual haunting, looked at me like a stranger and said the bridge had been dismantled years ago. Another woman insisted no train had crashed there. But the photos I printed, still here. The archived documents I took notes from, still dated August 28th, 1891. Still reporting 22 dead. The number appears everywhere now, license plates, receipts, my wrist. One morning, I woke up and found it inked faintly on the underside of my arm. And then there's the watch. It ticks again. Not regularly, only at 3:14 a.m., and always only for a moment. Then silence. I started keeping it under my pillow, afraid someone might take it. Or maybe I just didn't want to lose it. But this morning, when I woke, there was soot on the pillowcase, a fine dusting, as if something had burned through the night just inches from my face. And I wasn't alone. He was standing at the foot of my bed. The same uniform, same vacant stare, Same gold chain draped across his chest. The man with the watch. He didn't move, didn't speak. But something passed between us. An understanding, not of words, but of weight, of time crushed under steel, of pain caught in endless replay. In that moment, I remembered the fall. Not in fragments this time, all of it. The heat of the engine, the terror as the trestle gave way. My body lifted, torn from the cab, my eyes locking with the conductor's. His hand on the brake lever, too late. The pocket watch breaking free, spinning mid-air as the train collapsed beneath us. I was there. I always had been. And now I am again. Because the loop doesn't just replay, it pulls, it claims. Each year it grows stronger. The bridge doesn't wake, it remembers. And now it remembers me. I hear the whistle every night now, even when I'm nowhere near the tracks. I see passengers staring at me through windows that no longer exist. Time skips, days vanish. People speak to me with words they haven't said yet. I don't know how long I have left. Not here, not like this. But if you find this journal, if you're reading these words, stay away from Bostian's Bridge on August 27th, because the train is always on time, and someone has to ride it. Story 5. The Silver Arrow, Stockholm Ghost Train. I never believed in ghost stories, especially the kind that circulate like folklore among Stockholm's night workers and metro staff. As a journalist, I chased facts, not whispers, but there was something about the Silver Pillion legend that lingered in my mind long after I heard it. A silver train with no markings, no schedule, and no return. A train that appeared only to a few unlucky souls at night, never stopping at known stations. I told myself it would make a great blog piece. I didn't tell myself that I was curious in a way that felt almost reckless. It was a bitter winter midnight when I stood alone on the platform at Thorild's Plan. The wind howled through the tunnel mouths, scraping against the metal rails with a hollow screech. The last scheduled Green Line train had left 10 minutes ago. The platform was deserted now. No chatter, no footsteps, only the flickering overhead lamps humming like they were trying to stay awake. I pulled my scarf tighter and checked the recording app on my phone. My breath fogged the screen. Chasing Stockholm's urban myths, I whispered into it. Night 1, the Silver Arrow. 0 evidence so far, just frostbite and poor judgment. I was about to turn and leave when I heard it. Not the expected clatter of a metro car, but a deeper, duller rumble, like something older, heavier. The sound vibrated through the platform tiles beneath my boots. A train was approaching, but the tunnel it came from had no scheduled service this time of night. And then I saw it. Out of the dark emerged a silver metro train. Its body was raw, unfinished aluminum, the windows tinted too dark to see inside. No digital route marker, no station indicator. Just a sleek, almost spectral shape sliding forward with a quiet hiss of brakes. I stared, stunned, heart racing. It didn't make sense. This wasn't a retro line or museum piece. There was no record of silver trains in operation anymore, not since the 70s. The doors opened with a pressurized exhale. I stepped forward before I could think. Inside, the carriage was bathed in a sickly dim light that barely illuminated the interior. I scanned it. Empty. No, not quite. One young man sat alone near the back. His posture was rigid, his face turned forward, unmoving. He didn't even glance at me. I stepped inside. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, The doors slid shut behind me. The train jolted into motion. My stomach dropped. The digital display above the doors flickered to static. No next stop, no line color. Just silence. I sat across from the young man, trying not to stare. He was pale. His eyes, strange, unblinking, unfocused. His lips were slightly parted, like he was about to speak, but never got the words out. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me, do you know where this train is going?" No response. I reached for the intercom. Dead. I pressed the emergency button. Nothing. My phone had no signal, though it had been working perfectly minutes before. I looked outside. The windows showed only blackness. No tunnel lights, no signs, just the faint reflection of the interior and my own pale, confused face. I sat back down, heart racing. My instincts screamed at me to stay calm, but they also told me something else, something I didn't want to admit. I might have boarded the wrong train, and I wasn't sure it would ever stop. The further the train moved, the less I recognized anything outside the windows. It was as if the tunnels had warped, longer, darker, more silent than they should be. I lost all sense of time. It could have been 10 minutes or 2 hours since I boarded, but the silence remained unchanged, suffocating. I stood and tried the emergency intercom again. Nothing. No buzz, no static, just cold plastic under my fingers. I pressed the red button near the door. Dead. My phone still showed no bars. The digital route panel blinked erratically above the doors before finally settling on one word. Kimlinga. My breath caught in my throat. That name, I remembered it from a late-night conversation with a retired Metro guard during an earlier interview. His voice had dropped when he spoke it, like he was afraid the word itself would summon something. "Only the dead get off at Kimlinga," he had said. The lights flickered violently, and the train began to slow. No announcements, no mechanical chime, just the grinding shriek of brakes and a low mechanical moan echoing through the carriage. The doors opened. The air that poured in was bitter cold, unnatural, even for winter. The platform outside was deserted, bathed in a flickering greenish light from overhead lamps that hummed with decay. The tiles were grimy, some missing, and the pillars that supported the roof were lined with cracked ceramic panels. I stepped out cautiously. The silence felt wrong, not peaceful, hollow, like sound itself had been sucked from the air. My breath fogged in front of me as I turned slowly, scanning the empty station. The tunnel at the far end of the platform yawned like an open throat. It was darker than black, as though it absorbed the light. And then I heard it. Laughter. A child's laughter. Distant, echoing from the tunnel, distorted by the acoustics of the underground. I froze. There were no other passengers. There hadn't been any families, no children on the train, just that one man. I turned. He was standing now, just a few meters behind me. He hadn't made a sound. His face was still turned away, expression unreadable, and his mouth moved slightly like he was whispering to himself or to something else. I couldn't hear the words, just the dry rasp of breath slipping through unmoving lips. I took a step back. My heartbeat was in my ears. A draft swirled around my ankles, and for a split second, the overhead lights dimmed, revealing movement down the tunnel. Figures, not walking, not clear, like shadows caught in a dream. Flickering, indistinct, but unmistakably human in shape. I didn't wait. Without thinking, I turned and sprinted back toward the train, lungs burning from cold air, feet slipping against the grime-slicked tiles. The doors began to hiss shut. I dove through just in time, the edge of my coat catching in the seam as they sealed behind me. The man had not followed, but I still wasn't alone. Outside the windows, the platform slowly faded. Kimlinga dissolved into the dark behind me like it had never existed. Inside, the lights buzzed low and dim. I pressed myself against the back of the seat, trying to catch my breath. The seat across from me was now empty. The silent man was gone. I scanned the carriage, dread creeping up my spine. Then I saw him again, 2 rows closer. I hadn't seen him move. I would have heard the footsteps. But there he was, staring forward, unmoving. Only now something was different. His face was pale, paler than before. And his eyes, they didn't reflect the light anymore. They didn't move at all. I told myself not to panic, but somewhere deep inside I already knew this train wasn't taking me anywhere on a map. And I had a feeling Kimlinga wasn't the last stop. I should have gotten off at Kimlinga. I know that now. When the doors sealed behind me and the ghost station disappeared into the dark, I thought I was safe, that maybe the worst was over. But this train wasn't finished with me. The lights dimmed to a heavy flickering glow, and the hum beneath the floor deepened into a slow mechanical growl, like something far beneath the tracks had woken up. I didn't remember sitting, but I was suddenly back in my seat, frozen, watching the carriage stretch on in both directions impossibly long. And then I noticed him again, the silent man. Only now he wasn't where I'd last seen him. He was closer, just across the aisle. I hadn't heard him move. He sat motionless, head slightly tilted down, face pale, skin tight around the edges like it barely covered the bones beneath. His eyes, no longer vacant, looked wrong now, too still, too dry, like they weren't eyes at all, just glass buttons sunk into a wax figure. I blinked. Something changed. The graffiti that had covered the far wall earlier, the usual tags and symbols, was gone. In its place, a phrase was scrawled in fresh black strokes. Lena, over and over, in different sizes, different handwriting, some of them mirrored. I stood, heart hammering, and backed toward the connecting door between carriages. It opened with a reluctant groan, and I stumbled into the next car and stopped. There were others now, figures standing in the middle of the aisle, still unmoving, each one in outdated clothing, bell-bottoms, tattered scarves, old coats stained with time. I couldn't see their faces clearly. Their skin looked dry, almost flaking. They faced different directions, some forward, some sideways, some toward the ceiling, but none moved. The door behind me sealed shut with a mechanical snap. I took a step forward, then another. As I moved, a cold gust passed through the car. No windows open, no doors ajar, and the lights flickered again. One of them turned, slowly, with a grinding crack of joints that hadn't moved in decades. Its head tilted. I saw its face. Its eyes were hollow sockets, empty, and yet somehow aware. I gasped and turned to run, but the aisle now seemed longer than it had moments ago. No matter how fast I moved, the door at the other end stayed the same distance away. The figures blurred in my peripheral vision like static on an old television. Each step echoed louder, harsher, and soon I couldn't tell if I was walking or falling forward endlessly. Suddenly, the train jolted. My body pitched sideways into another carriage, one I hadn't seen before. This one was different. Seats torn, windows cracked, an emergency hammer still mounted beside the window rusted in place. The lights here were barely functioning, flickering just enough to show shapes sitting in the shadows. Not people, not quite. And on the floor, smeared in grime and grease, was another name, Lena. Only this time it wasn't written. It had been dragged like someone had scrawled it with broken fingernails. A loud thump hit the door behind me. I didn't look. I just ran. Carriage after carriage blurred together, some completely empty, others populated by those still standing passengers who never spoke, never moved, until I was too close. Their heads would twitch, their fingers jerk, their eyes, if they had any, would lock onto mine. At last, I stumbled into the frontmost carriage, or what I assumed was the front. The driver's cabin door stood open. I stepped inside and froze. No controls, no levers, no dashboard. Just a small square room lined with mirrors, cracked, smeared, warped. And in every reflection, I didn't see myself. I saw the man, the same silent passenger, sitting perfectly still in every mirrored panel. But in each reflection, he was a little different, older, younger, hollow-eyed, no face, decaying. In one, he stood directly behind me. I spun. No one was there. A voice rasped through the speakers, not words, just breathe, breathing too close, too slow. Then the train screeched. Lights went dead. The next stop blinked into life on the panel overhead, though I had no idea when it lit up. Ud Trask. I didn't know the name. It wasn't on any map. But I didn't care. I had to get out. I reached for the emergency release and prepared to jump. Because whatever Ud Trask was, it had to be better than what was still following me inside this train. I didn't know what I expected when I forced the emergency door open. Maybe alarms, maybe a cold blast of night air. What I got was worse. Silence. The moment my boots hit the platform of Ud Trask, the train behind me let out a groan like twisted metal under pressure, then vanished. I mean that, literally. No slow departure, no rumbling into the distance, just gone, as if it had never existed. Ud Trask wasn't a station so much as a forgotten scar underground. No advertisements, no announcements. The ceiling panels were cracked, wires hanging like veins, and the only illumination came from flickering overhead lights that buzzed like insects were trapped inside. It was cold, the kind of cold that doesn't touch your skin first. It goes straight to your spine. I started walking along the edge of the platform, scanning for a sign, an exit, anything. But there were only arrows, smudged with time and dirt, pointing deeper into the tunnel. Not toward a stairwell or an elevator, just into blackness. I should have stayed. I should have waited for someone, but I was too far past reason. I stepped off the platform. The tunnel swallowed me instantly. My phone still had some charge, but no signal, no GPS. Just a flickering flashlight app that barely cut through the darkness. After a few hundred meters, I heard it. Laughter. Not joyful, not human. It was the sound of something imitating a child, but getting the pitch wrong, like an echo played backward. I froze. My breath clouded the air. Then I saw it, a silhouette, small and still, standing where the tunnel split into two. For a second, it didn't move. I blinked, and it was gone. I ran. Every corridor looked the same. Concrete ribs, rusted cables, puddles reflecting my panicked face. I passed doors sealed shut with metal plates, windows smeared with dust and fingerprints on the inside. At one point, I saw a rusted metro map bolted to the wall. But the stations weren't right. They had names that sounded close, but not quite. Garmtorp, Ixburg, Silly Dallin. none of which had ever existed on any Stockholm line. Some were scratched out. Others had red circles drawn around them. One name at the very bottom chilled me more than the rest. Lena, scrawled in marker, different from the rest. Fresh. I stumbled backward, dropping my phone. As I scrambled to pick it up, the walls around me shifted. I swear they did. One moment, there was a corridor behind me. The next, it was a solid wall. The tunnel was rearranging itself. I screamed. No one answered. Eventually, I found a rusted stairwell behind a bent maintenance door. It spiraled up endlessly, the concrete steps crumbling under my feet. After what felt like hours, I reached the service hatch. I pushed it open and climbed out and found snow. Just no building, no station, no street lights. Just a frozen field under a gray, dead sky. A line of trees far in the distance. I collapsed onto the ice and let myself cry. By the time I found a road and flagged down a plow truck, the sun had started rising. I told the driver I got lost hiking. He didn't ask questions. When I got home, I checked everything, no trace. My travel card, never scanned. Metro log, no trains ran past 11:30 p.m. Utrecht doesn't exist, not even as a decommissioned site. But the worst part, the truly unbearable part, came 2 nights later when I plugged my phone into my laptop. The flashlight app had been recording. It wasn't video, just audio. One long file starting right after I stepped off the train. Near the end, just as I start to climb the stairwell, a voice whispers, "Next stop, Lena." I deleted the file. I don't need to hear it again. But sometimes at night, I still hear that train, that low hum under the city, and I never wait for the last one. Not in Stockholm, not anywhere. Because if the silver arrow finds you once, it might try again. Story 6, Kisaragi Station, Japan's Phantom Platform. I've taken the Enshu line every weekday morning for the past 3 years. Same station, same train, same seat, if I'm lucky. That morning was no different, at least at first. The rain was coming down in steady sheets, tapping like fingertips against the windows of the 7:12 a.m. commuter train. I boarded half awake, earbuds in, hood up, already dreading the spreadsheets and blinking cursors that waited at my desk downtown. The air inside the car was warm and stale, fogging the windows in a way that made the world outside seem further away than usual. I remember blinking up at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of the engine beneath a melancholy piano track. At some point, I realized we hadn't stopped, not once. 3 stations had come and gone, or should have, but the train kept rolling forward. No announcements, no chime, no voice from the conductor. A few passengers began to stir. A suited man beside me checked his watch. The woman across the aisle looked up from her phone, confused. I pulled out my own phone, just habit. But nothing felt off enough yet to warrant alarm. Maybe a detour, a malfunction, something technical. Then the train slowed with a sharp, unfamiliar screech. I expected to see a regular platform, maybe Tenryugawa or Nishikajima, but what greeted me was something entirely different. A sign outside glowed faintly through the fogged glass. Kisaragi Station. I frowned. That wasn't a real stop. I knew this line, all of it, even the small rural spurs. I'd never seen this name before. Neither had the older man behind me, muttering under his breath, "That can't be right." Then came the lights. They dimmed suddenly, humming low like a dying insect trapped in a glass jar. A flicker, another, and then they steadied, just enough to cast everything in a faint yellowish hue that made people look slightly off. The doors slid open with a harsh mechanical buzz, and no one moved for a moment. I stepped out instinctively, almost drawn, my foot hitting the wet concrete with a soft splash. The air was heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm, thick with the scent of damp concrete and ozone. Behind me, the doors remained open. No chime, no conductor's voice, just silence. I looked around. There were no station attendants, no schedules, no maps, only a single name on a crooked sign, Kisaragi. That's when something inside me twisted. I'd heard that name before, not on any official rail map, but online, years ago. A post about a girl who boarded a train just like this, who arrived at a place that didn't exist, a place she never escaped. My heart thudded once, hard. The train doors closed behind me with a final hiss, and then the lights went out. I don't know what made me step off that train. Maybe it was the silence, or the strange pressure in the air, like a room sealed too tight. Maybe it was the sheer wrongness of it all, the flickering lights, the sign with a name I recognized only from urban legends, Kisaragi Station. The moment my shoes hit the platform, I knew something wasn't right. The train doors hissed closed behind me with a finality that made me jump. No one else followed. Through the fogged windows, I could see the other passengers, frozen, uncertain. Then the train jerked forward and pulled away without warning, disappearing into the rainy dark with a low hum. I stood there, alone, surrounded by pale fluorescent lights that flickered like they were on the edge of failure. Mist clung to the platform, curling around my ankles. I looked down both ends of the station. No exits, no signs, just a long stretch of wet concrete bordered by dense black trees. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling slightly. No signal. I tried sending a quick message to my sister anyway. Nothing. Failed to send. The air felt too still, too heavy. I walked the length of the platform, checking for stairs, doors, emergency contact phones, anything. There was nothing, just that one rotting sign bolted to the railing, Kisaragi Station. Kisaragi Station. The memory slammed into me like a punch. That story. A girl who lived posted from a train that never stopped, who begged for help online when she arrived at a station that wasn't on any map. People thought she was making it up. But then the post just stopped. Some said it was fiction. Some said it really happened. I hadn't thought about it in years, until now. I turned in a slow circle. The platform was utterly, unnaturally quiet. No birds, no wind, just the soft buzz of the lights, and then bells, far off, hollow, faint, a slow repeating chime like something you might hear in a rural crossing. But this didn't sound like warning bells. It sounded older, almost deliberate. Then came the footsteps, crunching on gravel, quick, limping. I spun toward the sound, heart lurching. A man emerged from the mist, hobbling fast on one leg and a metal prosthetic. His coat was soaked, and his face looked bleached under the lights, pale and strained. He shouted, "Don't walk on the tracks, it's dangerous." His voice was desperate, too loud for the stillness. I opened my mouth, stepped forward. Wait, but he was already gone, like he'd never been there at all. I turned back toward the far end of the platform, a tunnel. It was the only direction left. I didn't want to go in, but staying here wasn't an option. I was starting to feel like I wasn't just alone, but watched. With one last look at the now empty tracks, I limped toward the tunnel, boots slipping on wet concrete. A pressure built in my head, and a strange vibration rang through my teeth. Whatever Kisaragi's station was, it wasn't built for people like me. And I had the sinking feeling that stepping off that train hadn't been a mistake. It had been a trap. The tunnel wasn't long. It just felt endless. Each step I took echoed like it was the only sound left in the world. The walls were damp and pulsing with condensation, and I kept slipping on moss-slick concrete. Every breath fogged up in front of me, and the air smelled like wet iron and something older, something that made my stomach tighten. My leg was throbbing from when I fell earlier. I kept going, dragging it behind me, trying not to think about how far I might have wandered from the platform. That's when I saw it. A black car, parked on the tracks inside the tunnel. No license plate, no markings, just sitting there like it had been waiting. Its engine was running low and steady, barely audible under the hum in my ears. A man stood next to it, tall, long raincoat, hands calmly folded in front of him. His face was obscured by shadows and the low tunnel light, but his posture wasn't threatening. In fact, he didn't move at all. He simply waited. I slowed. He raised a hand and gestured. "I've come to help you," he said. His voice was deep and clear. "It's not safe here." Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, but where would I go? Back to that station with no exits? Back to the bells and the mist and the man who vanished? So I climbed in. The car door shut with a heavy click behind me. The inside smelled like old vinyl and dust, like something unused for too long. The man sat in the driver's seat, eyes forward, both hands on the wheel. He didn't ask where I was going. He didn't ask anything. We drove. The tunnel stretched on in unnatural silence. That's when I started to notice the murmuring. His lips were moving, constantly, repeating something under his breath in a language I didn't know. Not Japanese, not English, just rhythmic syllables like a looping chant, too fast to follow. I stared at him through the rearview mirror. His reflection was blurry. No, it was different. The angle didn't match. I leaned slightly to the left. The reflection didn't follow. It stayed fixed, as if he weren't sitting where he should be. That was when I noticed his hands, pale, unmoving, but the fingers weren't in the right positions. They looked mirrored, almost reversed, the thumb where the pinky should be. I blinked and they seemed normal again, but the feeling wouldn't leave me. And then suddenly, the car stopped. We were on a narrow stretch of cracked highway now, completely empty. Fog licked across the road in tendrils, and the dashboard light flickered once, then went black. The man turned to me slowly, and this time I could see his face. It wasn't the face I'd seen before, not the man who waved me in. This face was gaunt, with skin stretched too tightly over its features. His eyes were colorless, hollow, as if they weren't looking at me, but through me. He smiled, not kindly, not reassuringly. It was the kind of smile that made my body go cold from the inside out. And then the radio crackled to life. A static-drenched voice said clearly, "Next stop, Nishikajima." I froze. That wasn't my line. That wasn't even close. The man's hands clenched the wheel. His lips moved faster now, muttering those same unknowable words. And I realized this car wasn't taking me anywhere I wanted to go. My hand shot to the door, locked. I pulled the handle anyway, once, twice, then slammed my shoulder into it. The man turned sharply, whispering something low, and the locks clicked open. I didn't wait. I threw the door open and jumped. The pavement rushed up and tore into me, knees, palms, the side of my face. Pain burst through my leg like fire. I rolled into the gravel shoulder, gasping. The car didn't stop. It disappeared into the fog as silently as it had arrived, and I lay there, bleeding, bruised, and absolutely sure of one thing. Whatever that man was, he hadn't come to help me. I hit the pavement hard. Pain burst through my leg as I rolled off the roadside shoulder, skin burning from the fall. I could still hear the tires of the black car skidding briefly on wet asphalt before the sound was swallowed by the mist. I looked back. Nothing. No lights. No engine hum. Just the thick gray curtain of fog closing in, making the empty road behind me feel like the end of the world. My hands were scraped, my jeans torn, and a steady pulse of blood warmed the side of my shin. But I was out. I was out. I staggered up, teeth gritted, and limped forward. The trees around the road were too still, not even bird song. Only the soft, mechanical crackle of moisture hitting leaves and my own panicked breathing. I kept walking. I didn't know how far I'd gone. 10 minutes, maybe 20. The fog made it impossible to tell if I was moving at all. At times I thought I heard the crunch of tires behind me again. But when I turned, the road was always empty. Then, out of nowhere, a light, not headlights. A faint orange glow ahead, like from a maintenance hut. I limped toward it, heart in my throat, and found a small train switching station at the edge of a junction. I pounded on the door. A man in a reflective vest opened it, eyes wide when he saw me. I need help, I gasped. There's a train station? Kisaragi? I got stuck there. My train never stopped where it should have. He cut me off. What station? Kisaragi, I repeated. I don't know how I got there, but it wasn't on the line. His brows knit together. There's no station with that name anywhere near here. I tried to pull up my phone, but it was dead. Fried. My messages hadn't gone through. I had no signal, no proof. The worker gave me a chair, a blanket, called for a medic. When the ambulance came, they checked me out. Just cuts, bruises, a strained tendon in my leg. Nothing life-threatening, but something had changed. I could feel it. I told the story, every part of it. The station, the man with the prosthetic leg, the car, the changing face, the voice on the radio that said, "Next stop, Nishikajima." They nodded slowly, listened politely. But I knew they didn't believe me. I was just another disoriented passenger. Probably fell asleep on the train, maybe wandered off on my own in confusion. That's what the report would say. But they didn't explain why my phone logs ended in a dead zone, one with no tracks, no tunnels, no cellular towers. And no one explained why the final ping from my device wasn't even near the Enshu line. I made it home, eventually back to my apartment, back to my routine. But nothing feels normal now. Sometimes when I board the morning train, I still see the number K13 flicker on the digital sign above the doors. There's no such route. I checked. Sometimes I hear a faint bell ringing when there's no temple nearby. And one night, I opened my phone and saw a drafted message I don't remember writing. It said, "I made it out, but I think it followed me." I never finished typing it, but the cursor was still blinking, waiting. Story 7. The White Lady of Begunkodor, Haunted Indian Station. I never wanted to be a conductor, to be honest. But in a place like Purulia, you don't pick dreams. You pick survival. When the assignment came in, A routine passenger haul through the dusk routes of West Bengal, I didn't think twice. It was supposed to be straightforward. No mountains to climb, no landslides, no nonsense, just steel on rails. But that morning, an envelope was waiting in the dispatch box. Unmarked, no signature, just a route correction, halt at Begunkodor. Begunkodor? I remember blurting out. Surav, the signalman, choked on his tea. You're joking? But the slip was real, logged and timed in the system. No one had seen who filed it. The route master, a leathery old man with half a voice left from years of shouting over diesel engines, swore he didn't issue it. Station's been dead since '68. You halt there, you halt alone, he muttered, eyes fixed on the rusted ceiling fan. We rolled out that afternoon with a light load, mostly goods, a few civilian passengers. The sun smeared gold across the hills as we picked up speed. By late dusk, we were threading the lonely curves of Purulia's red soil country. That's when the talk started again. Hushed voices among the crew about the white lady. She runs with the train, one said, half smiling, half whispering. White sari, hair soaked, never shows her face. I scoffed. Ghost stories were seasoning in this line of work. They filled the gaps between monotony and fatigue. But as we passed the milestone marker, Begunkodor 2 kilometers, the engine shuddered. A deep, rattling cough from the old diesel unit rolled through the cabin. The main console flickered, red warning, engine cooling failure. We had no choice. Protocol demanded a full stop. When I looked out the front window, my blood ran cold. A platform emerged from the creeping fog, overgrown and half swallowed by time. But its lamps, they were on, soft, yellow, and swaying. Must be old voltage, ghost current, the assistant engineer muttered. But no line maintenance had been reported here in years. According to records, Begunkodor station had been decommissioned for over 5 decades. It wasn't on any functioning schedule, not even as an emergency halt. Still, I stepped off. I told myself it was to log the engine issue. Truth is, I felt pulled. The gravel underfoot was loose and wet. The rails hummed not from power, but from memory. A faded plaque stared at me from the weeds. Begunkodor. Station code BKDR. A crow croaked once, then silence swallowed everything. Even the train behind me felt distant, like a fading photograph. I walked the platform. Dust clung to the glass of the old ticket booth. Inside, a single chair lay overturned. Cobwebs swung lazily from the ceiling. Then came the wind. Not a breeze, a sudden, sharp whip of air that slammed the door of the station master's quarters down the track. The bang rang out like a shot. I spun around, heart pounding. No one should have been there. And then, footsteps behind me, not hurried, not shy, measured, deliberate. I turned. No one. I stepped backward slowly, eyes fixed on the shadows pooling near the waiting room. That's when I noticed the platform lights were no longer flickering. They were steady now, as if someone had turned them on. To this day, I cannot explain what made me stay there a moment longer. Maybe curiosity, maybe something else. But something deep in me, a voice I don't hear often, told me this was no mistake. This was an arrival, not of a train, but of something far older, and it was waiting. There's a kind of silence that feels unnatural. Not the peaceful kind that wraps around hills or settles over small towns at midnight. This was different. This silence pressed. It breathed down the back of my neck like something alive. The engine had cooled. My crew stayed inside, too unsettled to step out. That left me, Manoi, standing alone on the forgotten platform of Begunkodor station, a place that shouldn't have been powered, shouldn't have been lit, and definitely shouldn't have been waiting. I stepped carefully. The concrete beneath me was cracked and spongy with moss. Every footfall stirred the dust of decades. The lamps buzzed above me. Not a healthy electric hum, but a sickly flicker, like they weren't getting their power from the lines but from memory. A faded green plaque caught my eye near a broken fence post, almost swallowed by ivy. Begunkodor, station code BKDR. There it was, as real as the rails beneath my boots, as dead as the story said. A faint dripping echoed through the air, not from rain. It was the slow, steady leak of time itself, or so it felt. Somewhere beyond the station wall, a rusted gutter expelled water in slow taps, each one landing like a dropped pin. I moved past the waiting bench, where seats had long since rotted away. The ticket booth loomed beside me, its glass shattered inward, not outward. That told me something had gotten in, or wanted to. Inside, a brittle ledger book lay curled open on the counter, pages stuck together by mildew. The names inside were too faded to read, but one caught my eye. Just a fragment. Angeli, 7:45 p.m. departure. One way. My breath fogged the glass. That's when the door behind me creaked. Not a breeze, not metal settling, a door, opening, then closing. I turned sharply toward the station master's house, a squat, weathered structure at the far end of the track. Its windows were boarded tight, but something inside had moved. The front door was shut, yet I swear I saw the curtain shift. Still, no one else had stepped off the train. I was alone out here, or I should have been. I called out, "Hello?" More out of protocol than hope. No answer. The wind picked up, tugging at the edges of my uniform. I started back toward the train, but just as I passed under the signal post, I heard footsteps behind me, measured, slow. I stopped, listened. The wind died. The dripping stopped. Even the insects fell silent. Crunch, crunch. Closer now. I spun around. Nothing. The platform stretched behind me in two directions, empty as before. But the footsteps hadn't been imagined. The air remembered them like ripples still moving after the stone has vanished. Suddenly, the train headlights sputtered. The front lamp cut out. One by one, the passenger car lights flicked and died, until only the platform remained lit, as if the station had stolen the power back. I heard a soft chime, the same kind that used to ring before a train announcement. But no speaker was connected, no voice followed, only static, faint, wet, and breathing. That's when I noticed the mist rising from the tracks. Not fog, mist, low, deliberate, and hugging only the rails, as if something used it to walk unseen. I didn't speak, I didn't move, I just listened, and I waited. Because whatever this place had been, it was not empty. And whatever had been waiting, it had heard me. I should have turned back. I knew I should have, but something, not fear, not bravery, just something, kept me standing there on that platform. Maybe it was the dead air, thick with tension, or maybe it was the sound I couldn't unhear. Footsteps where no one stood. I turned, heart pounding, eyes scanning the edge of the platform. That's when I saw her. She stood at the far end, still, facing away. Her white sari clung to her back, soaked through as though she'd just stepped out of a monsoon. Her long black hair hung wet, motionless. Though there was no more rain, no wind, no movement, I didn't breathe. The flickering station lights buzzed louder, as if agitated by her presence. Her posture was unnatural. Not stiff, not relaxed, but something in between, like her limbs were hanging from invisible strings. I should have spoken. I should have run. Instead, I whispered, "Hello?" She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge. Then, without warning, she began to walk, not toward me, along the track. Her pace was steady, barefoot, and utterly silent. Not a scrape, not a thud, like her feet weren't even touching the gravel. Behind me, I heard the faint cough of the train's engine sparking back to life. The lights in the passenger cabins flickered on. My crew must have still been inside, probably thinking the worst was over. I turned to call out, then froze. She was running. Her form blurred slightly at the edges, like she was moving between frames of reality. Her white cloth fluttered unnaturally, caught not by wind, but something else. Her speed. It wasn't right. It wasn't human. I backed toward the engine car as the lights above pulsed, each flicker brighter, then darker, then gone. The platform lamps died, all at once, as though they'd seen her and decided not to witness any more. Then came the sound, metal, screeching, bending. But it wasn't coming from the train. It was coming from her. I don't know how else to explain it. It was like she was dragging the weight of the tracks behind her, grinding iron on iron with every movement. I could see her, just past the engine's front window now, still running alongside the train. Her face still turned away, her arms unmoving at her sides, her feet never faltering. I reached for the cabin radio, static, dead. Then, for just a second, the lights returned, and she glitched. Her figure skipped a few feet forward in a blink, like a faulty reel of film. Then again, and again. Every new frame brought her closer to the front window, and suddenly I saw her reflection in the glass. Just a silhouette until lightning cracked. Her face, blanched, bloated, eyes wide, lifeless, mouth open in an eternal silent scream. I stumbled back, hit the engine control lever by accident, and the train jolted forward. But the movement did nothing. The ghost kept perfect pace, unaffected by physics, space, or time. Then she vanished, not slowly, not fading, gone. I rushed to the side window. Nothing but empty tracks. No rain, no footprints, no woman, only silence again. A moment later, I heard my crew shouting in confusion. The train had stopped, but we were no longer near Begunkodor. We were further down the line, too far, and the gravel beneath us had shifted. The train was tilted slightly, as if something had shoved it. I didn't realize the train had stopped until the silence sank in. No engine hum, no overhead buzz, no footsteps from the crew, only the ticking of the emergency dial and the pounding of my heart. I pushed open the cabin door. Rain had begun again, soft and sudden, as if summoned. The platform, gone. We weren't at Begunkodor anymore, but how far had we moved? The landscape outside was unfamiliar, trees warped by darkness. No signal tower, no track marker, just wilderness. I reached for the radio. Static. I adjusted the frequency, more static. Then a short click, and another, like someone tapping metal, slowly, deliberately. I backed away. That sound, it was inside the cabin. Then something shifted. A groan under the floor, like weight redistributing. I staggered to the opposite side and peered through the window. The entire train was leaning. I stepped outside onto the ballast. My boots slipped. The gravel was dragged like a trail left by something pulling the train sideways. I followed it. past the first coach, then the second. That's when I saw the indentations. In the earth beside the tracks, footprints, bare, deep, charred around the edges. They ran parallel to the train for a quarter mile. The crew was inside still trying to get systems online. No one had seen her, not directly, but they heard it. The scream, not from me, not from the engine, from the dark outside. One of the guards refused to look out his window, said he'd seen someone run past the train, faster than the train could have gone, said her sari didn't flap with the wind, it moved against it. And when the lightning hit, he saw her face. That same description again. Pale, bloated, frozen, eyes black like boiled glass. They asked me what I saw. I said nothing. I told them we'd had a power surge, a sensor failure. I lied. We made it back to the depot before dawn. But even then, the station tech said something was wrong with our engine data. The black box didn't log a stop at Begunkodor. It didn't log a stop anywhere. Just one long movement, then sudden drift. When they examined the undercarriage, they found stress fractures on the wheels, as if the train had been dragged sideways while locked in park. No one could explain that. One technician, a silent man, pulled me aside. He said quietly, "You saw her, didn't you?" I didn't respond. He nodded, like he expected that. Then he said something I haven't forgotten since. They say she was late the night she died, tried to catch the last train. Some say she still tries. I transferred out the next week, requested a different route. I don't take trains through Perulia anymore, not after dusk, not ever again. And I never look out the window when I hear footsteps running beside the train, because I know what I'll see, and I know what happens when you look back.